Okay, we're going to be discussing Siman Yud today. Siman Yud is the din of Maxzir Gurushtoi, or essentially when a person is allowed to marry a woman he already divorced, and when he's not allowed to marry a woman he already divorced. Shulchan Aruch begins by saying we have the crucial seifim and the siman are Sif Aleph, Sif Gimel, Sif Vav. Sif Aleph, Sif Gimel, and Sif Hey and Vav, really. But those are the ones that are most relevant today. Those are the ones we're going to be focusing on today. A woman who was married to a man divorced her, and then she got married to somebody else. And then she got divorced from the second husband, or the second husband died. She's not allowed to get remarried to the first husband. Why is that? There's a pasuk, V'holcha v'hoyso le'ish acher. The diuk is V'holcha v'hoyso. V'hoyso is Kedushin. What happens if, and then that's even if her gerushin was only because of a koil be'alma. The first gerushin was only a koil. That means that the first marriage was not really a marriage, and the get was not really needed. Even if it's gasha machmas koil be'alma, she's still not allowed to go back. And then she marries somebody else for real and gets a get. She can't go to the first person who gave her a get, even if it was only machmas koil be'alma. Now, what happens if she, after getting divorced from her first husband, she was mezana with somebody? It's no v'holcha v'hoyso. She could still go back to her first husband. Same thing fakert. If she was mezana with somebody and then she married somebody kedushin, and then she divorced them, she could go back to the person she was mezana with. Why? Because again, since there was no first kedushin, so she's not a surah. The only way to become the issur of Maxzir Gurushtoi, achar shenishאת לאחר, is only when there was a first get, and then a get from man A, and then she had a get from man B, or he died, and then she goes. That means then she had a kedushin to man B. Then she wants to go back to man A. Now, I said the reason is because of v'holcha v'hoyso. V'hoyso means kedushin, but not znus. Interesting, the Shulchan Aruch points out that, the Shulchan Aruch says over there, that even if it was znus, afilu miyuchedes lo, even if she was miyuchedes to him, that still is not considered the first kedushin for the purpose of that she's not allowed to get married to a second person. To go back to this person after she's married to somebody else. That means if a person was mezana with a woman, she was miyuchedes lo, and then she separated from him, and then she married somebody else, and then she gets divorced from him, she could go back to the person she was miyuchedes to in the beginning. The Bar Heitev points out over there, right on what's miyuchedes lo, that she was his Pילגש. We're soon going to get to this whole din of Pילגש, because even though it's not really relevant to the Siman, but since we're anyways discussing it, it's a good opportunity to discuss it. Tzemach Tzedek on, but I'm going to get to it soon. There is a understanding, Oimrim ha'olam, that there's a mitzvah to be Maxzir Gurushtoi. Is it taka azoi? So the Sefer HaChinuch says it's a good thing. Doesn't say it's a mitzvah. The Tashbitz in Shuvas Chele Gimel Siman Tes says it is a mitzvah. The Marshal says that it's a mitzvah only if the divorce was done wrongfully. It means if he divorced her for not for a valid reason, and then he marries her again, then it is a mitzvah. And the Radbaz in Chelik Chesim and Kufnu Gimel puts it out straight up. It's not a mitzvah. That's regarding the question: is there a mitzvah? Since we're discussing Maxzir Gurushtoi. Now, what is that she was nisgarish, that she got to get machmas koil be'alma, that is discussed over here? We did discuss at length when we spoke in Siman Vav about the whole Begeder of a koil, what's koil, and the 6-7 shuvas from the Rashba, and all the diyukim that the Achrayim do from it, and that the Tzemach Tzedek says to be machmer in all directions. But let's just go through it in short. The Rosh says, what is machmas koil? That she didn't have to receive a get midina, and still she took a get, she got a get, she can't go back to him. The Rashba, who we mentioned in the past, the Rashba himself in his various shuvas seems to, and the Rashba was brought in the Bes Yosef, seems to disagree with the whole notion of that. The Rashba doesn't agree that machmas koil is an issue. It seems to imply that he doesn't really look at it as such an issue. But again, there's contradictions in the Chuvas of the Rashba. There's different ways of explaining it. The Tzemach Tzedek, like I told you, takes the approach that all the Chuvas of the Rashba should be taken to be machmer in all directions. Now, what is the logic? Why is she not allowed to go back to her first husband, to the first megarish, if the only reason was because of a koil? The Torah is talking about the whole Chavay is talking about that the first marriage was a real marriage. It was first kiddushin and get, and then another kiddushin and a get, and then she can't go back. But if there's only machmas koil be'alma, there was nothing to necessitate the get in the first time around. So why is it that she needs to why can't she go back to him? The chayra midiraisa should definitely not be a problem. So the Rosh actually points out the reason for it is only because of Laz, Marisayan. People are not going to know that it was machmas koil. All people know is that there was a get the first time around, and they're going to start saying, oh, this guy, Marisayan, there's two Gdarim in Marisayan. Marisayan is discussed in different places in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Shabbos, and a lot of other places. There's a Marisayan that people are going to learn from you. That's one Marisayan that other people are going to see what you're doing and learn from you. And there's a Marisayan that people are going to talk bad about you. People are going to see something that's not really wrong and talk bad about you. This is the second category of Marisayan. People are going to look and see that this person married the woman that he gave a get to 20 years before, and he's going to say, they're going to talk bad about him. Now, even though it's pretty clear in Shulchan Aruch that if she was mezaneh with somebody, even if she was miyuchedes loy, and then she went and she got a get, and then she married somebody and got a get, and then she wants to go back to the first mezaneh, it's not a isur bichlal. There is a discussion, which is also, I'm not going to discuss it now, but if you're talking about a civil marriage, and since based on the same discussion of civil marriage, if civil marriage is considered znus or not, if a miyuchedes loy in Pילגש, if she needs a get or if she doesn't need a get, and but there is a practical thing. Yeah, sometimes a person comes to you, asks you a shaila. They learned in the Rambam that it's Mahzir Gurushaso, or learned in Shiuri Mahzir Gurushaso, Senišat Lacher is Asura. And there was znus first, and then she got divorced, and she married somebody else, and 25 years later she divorced him, and she wants to go back to her college friend. So you could just respond, it's not an issue.
The case is she was married to a college friend?
No, she was not married. Just znus. And it's Shem znus. The chazaka v'nei adam oiseh biloseh bila znus, which we're going to soon see, it doesn't apply in college campuses. It happens to be that in Shas Tshuvas Leiv Aryeh of Grosnas, and also I think in Be'er Avram of Rappaport, they were both Dayanim in London in the 30s, 40s, 50s, they over there cancel this whole chazaka and say that the way that the generations are today, it's very hard to say another moiseh bilas nos. But when you have, someone's going to come and ask you such a question, so if the person asks you the question, you tell them it's not a problem, you move on with life. If a Rav asks you the question, a rabbi, so just tell him it's not a problem, it's a Lav Dafka is going to appreciate that you just brush him off. You could write him a short one-page tshuva and make him happy that it says that you researched it and this is what the halacha says and it's mutter. It's practical. I'm not going to discuss it. Now, if she receives a get because of civil marriage, yeah. So I also discussed it when we're discussing kahuna, if she's considered a grusha ladin kahuna, and that's when we discussed all the rashbas. If she received the get only because of civil marriage, there's a clear tshuva from Avad Yosef that it's not a problem, but that tshuva in Chelik Vav Even Ha'ezer Siman Aleph, and the whole reason is because he holds that mi'ikara she did not need a get because of civil marriage. But again, that's based on the way he understands the Rashba, and it's based on the understanding that civil marriage doesn't even need a get bichlal, even l'chatchila. We paskin that yes, civil marriage, if you have shayla of mamzeres v'chulu, we're not going to consider it as a chuppah of a kedushin, but l'chatchila definitely there should be a get to be yaitze the shittas. The Rogatchover holds that civil marriage is a get; it needs a get. Rav Henkin also held that civil marriage, at least l'chatchila, needs a get. Rav Moshe, who paskins that civil marriage is nothing, also bepoil paskin that civil marriage, if you can get a get, you should get a get. So we will not consider it machmas koil be'alma, or even less than a koil. It's more than a koil. It's not even that Avad Yosef says that it's not. She doesn't even need it. So it's not even a koil. It's not even a koil get. It's a get betos essentially, and you don't even need the get. And therefore, she could marry that person. So if a person was civilly married to person A, and then she got a get because the Bezdin decided to do a get, then she married person B and got the get from him, and now she wants to go back to person A. We don't say it's Mahzir Gurusha, so we consider it as the first get was Bechlal not needed. That's the shit of Avad Yosef. However, the way like I explained to you, since he's based in the Rashba, according to Tzemach Tzedek, it would not work. The Beis Shmuel points out something which is very important and definitely to have it in the back of your mind, that this whole thing of Mahzir, of koil kedusha, a koil get, a get that was given is only when the get was given based on Hiraz Bezdin. That is also one of the explanations in the Rashba. Some of the Rashba, one of the ways of differentiating in the Rashba. But again, that chiluk doesn't work for us because it's Tzemach Tzedek says to be machmer according to all the chuvas of the Rashba. I mentioned Pילגש. I want to discuss an interesting tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek Siman Kuf Lamed Ches, where Tzemach Tzedek goes and turns over the idea of Pילגש, totally different than what is commonly understood. The story over there was a person had a wife and had kids, had a family. Had a big yitzhahara, and he went and he found himself another woman who is going to be his permanent girlfriend in addition to his wife. And he was miyachet to her house. And he was doing zech over there the whole time for a good 10 years, and he was behaving towards her like a Pילגש. And Tzemach points out that she was not tevel in the dosa except for a few times. I don't know how that is so connected to the story, but just maybe to point out what kind of personalities we're dealing with. Now he wants to dump her and move on with life, and she wants to know if she needs a get or not. So Tzemach Tzedek starts, and this is an interesting tshuva because Tzemach Tzedek doesn't start from discussing the halachas in Shulchan Aruch about Pילגש. Starts with discussing what we would call hilchas el Mashiach. It's not really hilchas el Mashiach, but it's the halachas and hilchas melachim. Hilchas melachim is a discussion about lo yarba lo noshim. The Gemara over there says, what's lo yarba lo noshim? It's obviously the number is 18. That's the number of noshim that the king is not allowed to have. The discussion in Gemara, Pilakshim are considered or not considered. The Rambam paskins that Pilakshim are part of the 18. So lo yarba lo noshim, the Rambam paskins is part of the cheshbon of 18. The Ravid says no, 18 is only noshim with chuppah v'kedushin, and the Pilakshim are not part of the cheshbon. The Kesef Mishnah brings a proof to the Rambam from the story of David and Avishag, and that over there was mashma that Avishag did need a get even though she was Pilakshay. And that Tzemach Tzedek first proof that Tzemach Tzedek brings is from this story that a Pילגש, even though she does not need chuppah v'kedushin and she does not have a ksuba, she still needs a get. And Tzemach Tzedek says it doesn't make sense that a woman who is miyuchedes loy, that she should just be able to walk out of the house one day and say, I don't need a get. And he points out, yes, the Lacha Mishnah tried explaining why, according to the Rambam, she does not need a get, and the Tzemach Tzedek his statement is Tchukim. Tzemach Tzedek proves that idea from the Tosfos, from the Ramban, from the Ran and the Ritva in Maseches Gittin. And he said, and the Tzemach Tzedek explains that according to the Rambam, we must say that there is a get, according to that she needs a get. According to the Ravid, l'chayra, she does not need a get. Tzemach Tzedek continues and brings another proof for it from the Gemara in Yerushalmi that she needs a get.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
Rambam says that the Plegashim are
part of the Cheshbon.
And who brought
Ravid disagrees.
Who brought it out for the Rambam?
Kesef Mishnah.
That what? From the fact that
David and Avishag, she was his Pelegesh, and it's mashma from the Psukim over there that the Pelegesh needed, that Avishag needed a get. There's a story of David and Ritzpah Bas Aya. I'm sorry for mixing you up with Tanakh so much. She was the Pelegesh of Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech was David HaMelech's shver. There's an Isur to marry Eishes Chamiv. I'm not talking about the shviger, we're talking about step shviger. Not that I understand why, but that's what, there's an Isur to do it, yeah? Why would someone want to marry a step shviger? And she was a Pelegesh of Shaul. And there's a whole discussion in the Shainim what the Isur over there is. There's a whole discussion in Yerushalmi what was the Isur over there. Miman of Shach, if she would not need a get, and she would not be Grushas Chamiv, what will be the Isur for David to marry her? And Tzemach Tzedek again proves from here that the reason why she would need a get is specifically Pelegesh that's Miyuchedes Loi, not Stam Pelegesh, Pelegesh that's Miyuchedes Loi. That kind of woman would require a get, and that's how it is. That's how he understands the Yerushalmi. Tzemach Tzedek continues in Eis Gimel and says, what?
What's the difference between Miyuchedes Loi and not?
Not Miyuchedes Loi is not a Pelegesh, it's Stamznos. But Pelegesh, that is Miyuchedes Loi, that is, the Tzemach Tzedek says it makes no sense that a woman who is committed to one person, is Miyuchedes Loi, is not playing around with other people, could just walk out of the house one day after 1 year, 10 years, 20 years and say, I'm free. Doesn't work.
Stam Pelegesh wasn't Miyuchedes? Stam Pelegesh wasn't automatic?
She was Miyuchedes. L'chayra, she was Miyuchedes. But I mean, Tzemach Tzedek shows all these places that it was a Pelegesh and she was Miyuchedes Loi. Otherwise, the Stam is Nus, not the Pelegesh. Then Tzemach Tzedek, I'm going really in short, so a very long tshuva, and the Tzemach Tzedek goes into a discussion. Maybe we could make, because there's some people who understood from the Gemara in Bavli that she does not need a get. Maybe we could say that the Machlek is Bavli and Yerushalmi. According to the Bavli, she doesn't need a get. Pelegesh does not need a get. According to the Yerushalmi, Pelegesh does need a get. And since we pass like the Bavli, so we can't prove anything from the Yerushalmi. And Tzemach Tzedek then says, no, he does not want to create a Machlekes Bavli and Yerushalmi, and therefore he prefers to say that the Bavli and Yerushalmi are not Cholek, and both of them hold that a Pelegesh does not need Kiddushin, and both of them hold, because then if you would say the Machlekes would be whether a Pelegesh needs Kiddushin or not. If you say that according to the Bavli, Pelegesh does not need Kiddushin, then it would make sense to say, well, she doesn't need a get. According to Yerushalmi, that we say she does need Kiddushin, that's pretty clear in Yerushalmi, so then it makes sense why she would need a get. Tzemach Tzedek says, no, he proves that even according to the Yerushalmi, a Pelegesh does not need Kiddushin, and just like the Bavli, and then since we don't have a Machlekes Bavli Yerushalmi whether she needs Kiddushin or not, so since we're able to prove from the Yerushalmi that she needs a get, we can't just discount it and say that since the Bavli does not imply that, she does not need a get. But then Tzemach Tzedek says, okay, let's say, this goes right into Oisei with Tzemach Tzedek, let's say she does not need a get. A regular Pelegesh doesn't need a get. We have a different problem here. Even if we say that Midina Pelegesh doesn't need a get, over here we have a question of Ein Adam Oisei Bilas Nus. It's mashma from Tosfos and Maseches Gittin, and over there he brings it. I'm not telling you each Tosfos where it is. That a the chazaka when ein adam oise bilasi beilas nus applies even if there was no kedushin. Yeah, there's a discussion whether ein adam oise bilasi beilas nus applies across the board, or it only applies. Some people are medayik that, some rishonim are medayik, some achronim are medayik, mainly rishonim, that it only applies by a person who is with his grusha after giving a get. That's when we say that the Moisei Bilasi Bilas Nus is Mechavan L'Shem Kiddushin. The Trumas Adeshin is medayik from Taisvus that in the Ein Adam Moisei Bilasi Bilas Nus applies to any form of more, we'll call it more permanent living, and not only in that form, and not only over there, but also in the Taisvus in Yevamis. And even though, according to the Rambam and the Rosh, we don't say without Kiddushin, without if there was no original Kiddushin. Still, no, Trumas Adeshin brings them and says against the Taisvus and against the other Rishonim which hold Adam Oisei Bilasi Bilas Nus applies even without Kiddushin, and Bichlal, we can't go against those Rishonim. And then the Tzemach Tzedek brings a proof from the Shas Chuvas Binyamin Zev that's mashma, that seems pretty clear that a Pילגש also we say Ein Adam Oisei Bilasi Nus. Then Tzemach Tzedek says and continues and says, and all this would only apply in the time back in the day when the Pילגש did not require Kiddushin. The minhag was take a Pילגש without any form of Kiddushin. But in today's day and age that we are Mahmir, today's day and age that the Pילגש also needs some form of Kiddushin. So then if somebody was miyachet for himself a Pילגש, maybe we could say that he considered it like znus, because he would have known, because he dafke did not do the form of Kiddushin, and therefore it shows that he did not consider her a Pילגש. Stam znus, and we shouldn't say that ein adam oise bilasoi bilaznus. And Tzemach says it does not work when you have such a long time. You want to say a Pילגש for a month or two or three is fine. Over here we're talking about a case of a Pילגש for 10 years. That you can't go and say that he had no intention of some sort of commitment between the two. And it's not, because you look at it from the logical point of view. What's Kiddushin? The Rogatchover, which says Kiddushin is two parts: oyser her to the world, and lock her up, not by hand, but for himself. Yeah, she's only for him. First he separates from the rest of the world, separates her from the rest of the world, and she is only dedicated to him. And a get is faket. There is he's megara, she cuts his part that she's no longer only for him, and he's matir her to the rest of the world. It's two pu'ulas in Kiddushin, two pu'ulas in a get. When we're talking about Pילגש, we could say the same idea. This whole discussion is if a Pילגש is a serious relationship, that he looks at it that she is only for him and not for the rest of the world, and that is the point of miyuchedes, then you have an element of Kiddushin here for all practical purposes, and that's the Ein Adam Oisei Bilasi Bilas Nus. There is an element of Kiddushin here, not actual Kiddushin, but there is an element of separating her from the rest of the world. So even if you would say that she does not need a get because there was no Kiddushin, that she's Mekadesh for himself and Oyser and the rest of the world, one part of the get is still needed. Right? The separating it from him, or the allowing her to the rest of the world. Some pe'ula of a get is needed over here. And that's what the Rogatchover says, that civil marriage requires a get, is considered a marriage. So over here, Tzemach Tzedek says, back to Tzemach Tzedek, that you can't say that the mere fact that he didn't do Kiddushin and lived with her means that he was planning on znus, because the fact is she was miyuchedes for 10 years. So he says, okay, fine, that's not good. Let's say a different angle. Maybe we're going to say that he was mechavan to znus. Why? Because he's Ashkenazi Jew, falls Bnetgarша. Can't have a second wife. So obviously, if he had a second woman, it was clearly for znus and not for the purpose of kedushin. So Maxedek says this also doesn't work. Why? Because a lot of days that say there's no chen in the Bnetgresha by a Pילגש. So therefore, it's a Maxedek paskins that when you connect these two reasons, first of all, that there's enough of a svara to say that she needs a get, a Pילגש bichlal needs a get. And even if not, because of a shayla v'einad moise bilose bilaznus in such an instance, so Maxedek says, ein beyodi lehatira le'alma beloy get, v'nochin lehisametz ledaber al liboy sheyiten get. Doesn't say she needs a get, but work very hard to get a get, and I'm not comfortable telling you she does not need a get. But he says it should not be done with a pirsum, rather, and not make a whole story out of it. It shouldn't even be you could tell that it shouldn't even be miyad liyad. It should be mimana shliach, and it should be mimana sefer and edim. And some Maxedek over there adds, and the sefer could himself become the shliach, which is interesting because that itself is a discussion if it's on the chatchila b'diavad. Over here, the Maxedek puts it out as obviously brings it in such a scenario, so it obviously is a b'diavad, and the shliach, the sefer will be the shliach, and the edech simmer will also be edem mesireh. And he says, and then the Tzemach says, and if the Rav is not able to convince him to get a get, eini oimer lo isur v'lo heter. He said, I'm not going to say it's asur because you have the shittas that say that it's mutter, that she does not need a get, a pillage. I can't say it's mutter. I'm not going to go against the Rishonim, which say that it's asur. And then after the Tzemach Tzedek continues, brings a raya from the Pashas Drochim of the Mishnah Melech that it's mashma that she does need a get, and the raya from a Gemara Maseches Nida that seems like it does not need a get, and then afterwards, this is all a pilpul, and then afterwards it says Mashe Shafti Biktzore Al Zel Maise, and he repeats in 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, everything that was written before in short, with the conclusion that there should be a get. So that is Midin Pילגש. So Miyuchedes Loi, that we look at it over here, even though Shulchan Aruch says Miyuchedes Loi by znus, she could go back to him if it was znus Miyuchedes Loi, and then she married somebody and then she got a get. It's obviously not going, if we're in our scenario, she's not Miyuchedes. If she was Miyuchedes Loi, l'chatchila she would definitely require a get, and if she would definitely require a get, then if she marries somebody else and she gets divorced from him, she can't go back to the first one because there is a get. That is regarding Pילגש. That's Sif Aleph. Now comes Sif Gimel. Interesting, not a Mahzir Gurusha Snišat Laachar, but a different kind of Mahzir Gurusha. Hamoitzi Yisishte Mishum Shem Ra. Yeah, what's that? The Shem Ra we're soon going to see, or Shinadronis, Hailenis, whatever. There's different reasons why he would want to give a get to his wife. And he says, the Shulchan Aruch says he can't remarry her. And the Shulchan Aruch brings 3 opinions, 3 shittas. All 3 of them are in the Rishonim. When can he not remarry her? And he says, first of all, if he tells her, he has to tell her tonight kaful, I'm divorcing you because of a shem ra, and if not for the shem ra, I would not divorce you. Option number 1. Second shitta, and therefore if he didn't do the double, he could remarry her. Second shitta, he only has to say, I'm divorcing you because of this issue. It's also Shulchan Aruch, straight up Shulchan Aruch. And the third shitta, he doesn't even have to say it, and he's still not allowed to marry her. So what is this shem ra that we're talking about? It's a koil. Yotzal a koil, she's mezaneh, but the koil was not huchzak bebezdin. If it was koil huchzak bebezdin, then it's not machmas shem ra. It's machmas koil shehuchzak bebezdin, which is chayev legarsha. Elamai, the husband is uncomfortable and he wants to divorce her. What's the reason why he can't remarry her? Because if she marries somebody else, then something might happen. He's going to come and say, if I would have known that the koil was not true, or if I would have known that she's not a ailonis, if I would have known that she's not a nadronis, it's only a one-time thing, I would have not divorced her. If I would have not divorced her, it says it creates a shaila on as a t'nai on the get, and the t'nai, if that was a t'nai why he divorced her, and therefore the t'nai was batal, the get is batal. Now that she married somebody else, the kids are mamzeirim, and therefore he has to say that I'm divorcing you because of this, but not on condition of this, and they have to, Bezdin has to tell, that's why he's not allowed to remarry. Bezdin has to tell him, you're not allowed to remarry her. And we're soon going to see in Tzemach Tzedek why they're saying, that's why I'm not remarrying you. That's why, and saying that you're not allowed to marry her is what prevents the get from being batel. According to the first shitta, it has to be, it's mamash like dinei tanoim. That's why it needs a t'nai kafel. According to the second shitta, that you only have to say what it is because of Laz, not because of Tanai, and therefore he can't really mess her up and mevatel the get, but it's an issue of Tanai. It's not an issue of Tanai, it's an issue of Laz. And according to the third shitta, it's obviously doesn't even have to say anything. Now, when you look at it, say, what do you mean he doesn't have to say anything? So how do you know that he divorced her because of this? Obviously, he came to Bezdin and he said, I want to divorce her because of this. The only thing is, he didn't say it at the time of the get. That's the reason why I'm divorcing you. He doesn't have to say it at the time of the get. But there has to be a knowledge to the Bezdin that is why he gave a get. In the interesting shuv of Neder Behuda, of an Hazar Kam Madura Kam סימן Yud. If the woman was moide in Bezdin that she was mezaneh, and therefore Bezdin told her that she has to get divorced, and then afterwards the research was done and was discovered that she was lying and she just wanted to get out of the marriage, he is not allowed to remarry her, even though he did not say he's divorcing her because of that. The Bezdin told him to divorce her because of that, even though he himself is not saying the Kuli Alma, he's not allowed to marry. Even according to the first two shittas, he's still not allowed to remarry her because we have a non-sahadi that is the reason why he divorced her. Tshuva from the Tzemach Tzedek in Siman Chav Ches, which seems like it was written as a pilpul rather than a tshuva. There's no question and no answer in the tshuva. Rather, it's one long mareches summarizing the whole topic of Maxir, of Girsha Machmas Shem Ra. He starts with the Gemara that says about someone who was divorced because of Shem Ra, can't get married to her forever. And Tzemach Tzedek explains what does Shem Ra mean. Sheyatzo aleho la'aznus, that the rumor is that there's a znus. And over there, the Gemara, from where we know that he has to tell her that is the reason. How he has to tell her? Machlekes Amiroim, Tanaim Amiroim, how he's supposed to tell it to her, if he's supposed to tell it. And first, when it starts, the Ois Beis Tzemach first discusses the issue of T'nai Kafel. The first shitta that needed T'nai Kafel, back and forth. That he says, I'm divorcing you because of Shem Ra, and if not for the Shem Ra, I would not divorce you. And the Tzemach Tzedek says, why? And we say that we also have to tell him that we're not divorcing, that I'm only divorcing you, that you can never go back to her. So that way, if there is if afterwards in his body that there was not a Shem Ra, and he says, I would have known, I would have not divorced you, it does not cancel. So it says, first of all, there will never be a situation that he could say, if I would have known, I wouldn't have given you a get. Why? What is he saying in Bezdin? He's saying in Bezdin, I'm divorcing you because Yotza alayich Shem Ra. He's not saying I'm divorcing because you're mezana. Yotza alayich Shem Ra. Yotza alayich Shem Ra is a fact. There was a Shem Ra. The fact that afterwards the Shem Ra was nisbader, that it's not true, doesn't mean that at the time there was no Shem Ra. There was a Shem Ra. So he divorced you because of Shem Ra. And he can't say, and he says, if there wouldn't be rumors on you, I wouldn't divorce you. But there are rumors. And the rumors were at the time of the get. The fact that the rumors were disproven doesn't mean that the get becomes batel. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, I don't understand why that is needed. And then to do it the other way, that if he divorces her because he's told, he divorces her even after he's told that that he can't get remarried to her. And that is why he gives the get. Yeah, that's why in his mind he gives the get, knowing that he'll never be able to remarry her. And on that idea, still, how does that help that creates a bittul get? How does that help to prevent the bittul get? If if it was nisbare that the whole Shem Ra was fake, and so he's going to say, I divorced her based on Shem Ra. I thought the Shem Ra was real. That's why you told me I can't marry her again. But now that I know that the Shem Ra is fake, so therefore what you told me that I'm divorced, that I can't marry her ever again is no longer valid, and therefore the get is still going to become batel. So whichever way, either you don't need it or it doesn't help. That's the Machzedek asks, and that's we'll call it the opening statement of the Machzedek after about a column and a half, but that's like the opening question. That's what the Machzedek wants to answer throughout this very lengthy tshuva. So first thing that the Machzedek says, we must say that it's not the full Tanai. It's not a Tanai Gomer. It's not a full Tanai. He didn't say that if the Shem Ra is true, I'm divorcing you, and if it's not true, I'm not divorcing you. He said, I'm divorcing you because of a Shem Ra, and if there would not be a Shem Ra, I will not divorce you. So he's not divorcing because of what's behind the Shem Ra. He's divorcing because of the Shem Ra, and he's not doing it as a Tanai, like we said earlier. And then the Tzemach Tzedek goes into another discussion and starts in Eis Gimel discussing the shittas. According to the Rambam, the get is batel. Shittas of the Rambam, if there would not be the explanation, and he would say he's Begder because of Shem Ra, and then after his body the Shem Ra was not good, the get is batel. And there's shittas, there's the get is batel. Shittas is only mishum las. We said there's two ways. The Rambam takes the approach that the get is mamash batel. And Tzemach Tzedek says that the machlekes is dependent on whether when he divorces her, it's considered a Tnai Gomer or it's not considered a Tnai Gomer. That means if we say it's a Tnai Gomer, and that's why you need kafel, or maybe not kafel, but it's still a Tnai, then obviously if the Tnai is cancelled, the get is cancelled, and the get is bottom of the Raisa and the bottom of Zayda. That's that shit. And even if you say it's not a mamash at Tnai Gomer, the Chachamim made it like a Tnai Gomer. So according to that shit, which is the shit of the Rambam, the warning of you can't marry her ever again is not going to help. Why? Because if it's going to be nisbarer that the whole Tnai, if it's atake Tnai, nisbarer that the Tnai was based on a lie, because the Shem Ra is a lie, then the get is anyways going to be batel. What difference does it make? So therefore he has to say that, therefore he says that what he says at the time of the get is not a Tnai. It's a Gili Milsa. He's telling the Bezdin that the reason I'm divorcing her is because of this, because of the Shem Ra. And in his mind, it's really a suffix. And what's the purpose of the Bezdin telling him you can never remarry her? To tell him, Gurushtó, younger man, this is Shem Ra by you as a suffix. We don't know if she was Mezana. You don't know if she's Mezana. It's a Shem Ra. That's a little shame. You can't divorce her only because of a suffix. We're telling you right now, if you're going to give a get, you can never marry her again. That means you have to be clear in your mind that this woman will never be yours again. So he is Gmirus Das in his mind to give a get is not because of only the Shem Ra, because the Shem Ra by him is only a suffix. The Gmirus Das is because the Bezdin told him, you'll never be able to marry her again. So once he hears that the Bezdin will never be able to marry her again, so by him, he agrees to give a get fully and unconditionally based on the fact that there's a suffix and he's uncomfortable with the suffix. But the reason he's giving a get is not because of a suffix or because of the Shem Ra, which is essentially a suffix, but based on understanding that this get is a final get. So therefore, there's nothing which could cancel. So therefore, even if the Shem Ra is later cancelled, nothing changes, because when he gave a get, the Shem Ra was only a suffix, and now it wasn't his barer that his suffix was wrong. The suffix be no more a suffix, but that wasn't what created the get. The get wasn't based on a suffix. Maybe you're mezana, maybe not. The get was with understanding that you'll never be able to marry her again. And so it continues, and Oisei explains it even further. That when he has explained this, is for him to understand clearly that if you're only giving the get because of a shem ra, which is a suffix, afterwards the get could become batal. And that is why we are telling you, he has to understand it. That's not I don't say he has to be told this whole pilpul, but it seems like the fact that Tzemach wants him to have it in his mind that the Bezdin should be giving him a little bit of understanding why he can't never remarry her. So you should understand that because of the shem ra alone, this get is not a full get because of a t'nai. We make the get without a t'nai. Yes, you're coming to us because of the shem ra, but the get is being given with the understanding that it's a final get that you could never marry her again because of your suffix. So therefore, regardless of what the outcome of the suffix is, you still can't marry her again. This get is a final get, it's not a t'nai.
Why can't you just kind of that the only reason I'm the same class for that is because I thought it was real?
Because still thought it was real. There's no proof that it was real. That's what has to be explained to him. So once he understands that, so it's clear that when he gives a get, he's giving a get based on a suffix, because of a suffix, maybe she was mezaneh, and he doesn't want to stay with her until the suffix is nisbarer. He doesn't want to take chances. There's a woman in his house, there's a suffix mezaneh. He doesn't want to take chances. So he prefers to go and give a get, understanding that it's a final get, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. So when the Bezdin tells him that, that's when this suffix turns into not a vadai that she was mezaneh, but the suffix that the reason for the get is no longer because maybe she was mezaneh, but it becomes clear it's a final get, and therefore the get cannot become batal even if it becomes clear that the shem ra was a lie. Why? Because now, even if it's nisbar that the shem ra was a lie, he still can't marry her again, right? He still can't be mahzir because it was megadasher. So once he understands that, the get can no longer be batal. Now, even though we know, we're going to see later in Kanas lo yotzi, that if he marries her, he doesn't have to divorce her. Yeah, it says you can't say that he divorced her, understanding that he can't remarry her, but knowing that if he still marries her, he could go back to her. That's too far of a stretch to say that he would go through this whole thought process and therefore would still go back to there's a t'nai in the get, and the get becomes batal. And then the Tzemach goes in Ois Vav, and Ois Zayin discusses other shittis, and it brings in Ois Zayin an interesting Tshuvas Maram Lublin, that what does it mean that why that it doesn't mean that the get becomes batal, but that the t'nai is if the shem ra is not sure, like we explained until now. But the t'nai in his mind is that if it's nisbarer that my get that this whole story is false, I would want to remarry you. That means he understands, he gives a get, the get is final. He understands that if he gives a get and he wants to remarry his wife, he's going to have to give a new kiddushin. So when he comes and he says, Machmas shem ra, I'm divorcing you because of a shem ra, he's not saying that I'm divorcing you because of, he's not saying that if is this barer that the shem ra is not real, then the get is cancelled and you're coming back to my house. No, it means that I want to remarry you down the line. So therefore, that becomes the t'nai, that I'm giving a t'nai, I'm giving a get on condition that I can remarry you if everything works out. And that is the issue. That is the issue. Why? Because then, that's why the Bezdin comes and tells him, no, you're not allowed to remarry her after you give this get. So therefore, in his mind, the t'nai was, I'm divorcing on a t'nai that maybe, that if it's all good, I will remarry you. By saying it, you can never remarry her. You're taking off this t'nai by him understanding, no, the get is final because you know the get is final. and you think that you're going to make it tonight, you could remarry her. No, the answer is no, you cannot remarry her ever. And if you still want to go further with the get, then the get is fully kosher. And that is the purpose of telling him that you can't remarry him. And therefore, and that's the shit of the Maram Lublin, which is obviously not according to the Rambam, who he says the get is batel. The Rambam says the get remains kosher the whole time. The issue is about the Tanai, which if she doesn't get remarried, it can make the get batel. What's the Tzedek himself doesn't like this reason, doesn't like this reason so much. Why? Because he says, even according to Maram Lublin, ultimately, if his mindset was, if you want to follow Maram Lublin, if his mindset was he's giving a get because of the Shem Ra, with the idea of down the line, is because he thought that the Shem Ra was true, and then afterwards he's going to think the Shem Ra is not true, so the get is anyways going to become batel, 2 steps rather than 1 step, but still going to become batel. So therefore we have to say that the reason why he was megadesh her is because he wanted to be megadesh her. So could be he used this as an excuse, could be this triggered it, but once it's clear to him that this get is final, that's why the get does not, so then he understands that yes, you're giving a get, so it's not really because of the Shem Ra, it's because of everything around it, and because he wanted to give a get for something else, and he was using for an excuse, or because he understands that he's not going to be able to marry her. And therefore, therefore, being that the Shem Ra is a suffix, that he's doing it because of a suffix, but the get ultimately is based on the get is ultimately based on understanding that this get is final, and the get is take final, and he can't cancel it. So Mahzir goes after us another discussion, which I'm not going to get into now. If it was megadesh a woman because she was reya machmas tashmish, that he could have said if it would have been fixed, if I would have known I could have fixed it, I would have fixed it. And over there the Gemara says the get is batel. So maybe over here also we could prove from that the get is batel. The Mahzir says no, we can't compare the two, because over there it's clear what the reason is. That is reya machmas tashmish. And over there, or a shein leveses, sorry, not reya machmas tashmish. It's megadesh because ein leveses. And over there we say that if he divorces her, he can't marry her ever again. And over there we have to make it clear that the get should not be batel. He says over there it's totally different, because how would he know that she has a veses if she marries somebody else and has a kid? So if she marries somebody else and has a kid, she's anyways not allowed to go back to him, because maxir gurushav senišat laachar doesn't help him. So that's a more extreme case. That's where we could be choishish that the get is batel. But over here we're not choishish that we can't compare the two cases one to another. And over here the chashash is bigger, because over here the Shem Ra itself is a suffix, and that's why we have a chashash. That's why we have to clarify over here that even though your chashash is a suffix, you should know that the get is completely final. There is another discussion in the Tzemach Tzedek over there, since he mentions one of the reasons of understanding it is that it's not a Tanai, but it's a Gilui Das. Tzemach Tzedek says, in Mamonis, we do have the idea that Gilui Das is something in certain scenarios. So why do we say over here that Gilui Das is not enough to create a Tanai? And he explains why it's different than why Mamonis is not the same as a get. And even though the Bach and the Michtav Melio on Gittin say that there is a possibility of Gilui Das, even in a case of Gittin, that Gilui Das is only together with the Umdana. When you have a Gilui Das plus a Umdana, that's even stronger than a T'nai. But over here, when it's Tama Gilui Das without a Umdana, there is no Umdana. If there would be a Umdana, he would have to divorce her. This is a Shem Ra, it's only dealing with Gilui Das, then it's not a problem. That is, we're going to Sif Gimel. We'll move on to Sif Hey. We say if he marries Sif Hey in the Shulchan Aruch, if he goes and he marries somebody else, if he goes and remarries her after it's asur to him. So then he doesn't have to divorce her. And what happens if he did divorce her? And because he thought that he has to divorce her, he was told that it's asur. He married this woman that he's not allowed to marry. Because of the get, one of these cases. And then he heard that it's asur. And then he went, they gave her a get. But he has kids from her from the second round. So the Shulchan Aruch says he's allowed to marry her a third time because just there shouldn't be laws on the kids that people are going to start saying that these kids are problematic. Now, why lo yotzi? Why do we say he doesn't have to divorce her if he married her a second time? We say because that essentially cancels the shem ra. Because if he marries her after he gave a get because of shem ra, he marries her again, even though he's asur to marry her, Chachamim say probably he researched a shem ra, he realized that it's not a shem ra, he went back to marry her. Chachamim are not going to be goyzer so far down. That's how the Aruch HaShulchan explains it. The Rivosh says that even if Bezdin warned him that he's not allowed to marry her, he still went ahead and marry her, he still does not have to divorce her. But the Rosh says that if Bezdin told him he's not allowed to marry her, and he still went ahead and married her, then he does have to give her a get. Yeah, and Siv Vav is where it says that when he divorces her, he has to be told that he will never be able to remarry her for these cases of Shem Ra and everything else. When do you say that? The Avnei Miluim, which is from the Ktsas, he wrote on Even, he says that you have to say it at the moment of the get mamish. Why? Because that's when he is doing the Tanai. And he's doing the Tanai that I'm divorcing. In his mind, he would do the Tanai in that moment that I'm divorcing because of a Shem Ra. So you have to clarify it to him at the moment. Then you should know your Tanai has no validity, and because you will never be able to remarry her. But if you're going to follow, it seems like if you're going to follow the Swat, it's not a Tanai, but it's only Mishum Laz or Gilui Das, or those kinds of things, then really you could say it before, you could say it after. There's no problem. It just has to, you could say it before, you could say it at the time, you just have to understand that there was not, that if you don't have the issue of a Tanai, you don't have to say it right before the get. Now what happens if they forgot to tell him that, and he wants to remarry her? There's the Beis Moshe explains that he could marry her again. Why? Because if somebody else is going to marry her and you didn't tell him that, it could create the laws on the get or a bittul or everything else. So it's better that he marries her than somebody else should marry her. I want to finish with a short story that I had to deal with years ago. A story which ended up as follows. There was a person that a couple was married and something happened, kinds of drugs to help you refocus, and she thought she's getting certain kind of, she became friendly with a guy, she thought she was going to become a certain kind of drugs, and then she ended up with a different kind of drugs, and then she thinks he was with her. She came back home sometime later, and the husband gave a get. Why did he give a get? Of course, he lived with her afterwards, but then sometime down the line, he decided he's giving her a get, and she went afterwards, and she decided that she got a get from him as a result of this story. That's what it seems like. And then she went to move on with life, and she started finding other people. She was looking for somebody else. A year or two passes, and she stabilized her mental issues, and he couldn't find her. For Zivuk Sheni, he decided that she's better than whatever else is on the field, and he wanted to marry her again. So who did they go to? Instead of going to the Bezdin, they went to the rabbi of the shul, and the rabbi of the shul says, "Why'd you give her a get?" And she says, "I was mezana with a guy." So the rabbi, the chacham, asked, "Do you believe her?" And he says, "Yeah." Right. So he says, "I can't marry you." That was the story that came up. Right. So the question is now, could he marry her again? Well, first of all, she was moided that she was mezana, right, with a guy, and the husband believes her. So Medina, he would have had to give her a get. He didn't give her a get right away. Zacharai that lav dafka he believed her at the moment. And if you look in Siman Kufta as well over there, when it discusses that if a woman tells her husband that she is mezaneh, even though she's not neman, if the husband divorced her, machmas, if he divorced her, then he can't marry her again. And but again, when you look over there in the Beis Shmuel and in the Chelkas Mechaykek, that the Isser to remarry is only if she continues saying after the get that she was mezaneh. If she doesn't say after the get she changes her mind, then we know that the only reason she said it is because she wants to get a get. And now that she's free, if she still continues saying it, so it's the truth. If she doesn't say it, then she is not like that. So now the question is, if this znus that she had with a guy was the reason for a get, then she's asura to go back to her husband. Now there is a whole discussion. There's a shittas Rabbeinu Tam, that a woman who was with a guy, and then the guy converted, if she is muter, if she's asura lebal or lebayil, or only to one of the two. And he over there he mentions b'derech agav that the bias nochri is not oiser. So kama miksas rabbeinu atzarfatim shekos shebias goy eino eseres lebal, and it's not bias goy is not eseres isha lebayil. What is the reason that there's some, and the Rabbeinu Tam argues and says that she's asura lebal, but she's not asura lebayil. What's the reason for it? There's an interesting Avnei Nezer Siman Yud Zayin, where he explains that the reason is because what's the issur? Why does a woman have to get a get when she's mezaneh? Because ma'ala boy mal, she broke the bond. She broke the bond with her husband. Boy, mal, she cheated on him. And she had in mind to cheat on him. So he says, according to Rabbeinu Tam, why she's asura lebayla but not lebayil, is because when she was with the goy, she had in mind limoil mal bebayla, mal boy mal. She still cheated on him. So therefore, she's asura to him. That's one tshuva with Avnei Nezer. Different tshuva with Avnei Nezer explains fakir that even according to Rabbeinu Tam, we say that she's not asura to her husband, but it's only based on the idea that she was ma'alo boy mal, that there was a certain form of intent with the goy lim oil boy mal. Otherwise, if there was no lim ma'alo boy mal, there shouldn't be a problem. So the question is, what happens in such a scenario when?
Why is it no ma'alo boy mal with the goy?
Why is it not? Yeah. It is. Mal boy mal. But there's a whole discussion for Rabbeinu Tam holds that the bias nochri is oisra lebayla or not. The whole discussion if bias nochri is oiseres lebayla or not oiseres lebayla. And if you explain that the bias nochri is oiseres lebayla, even if those that hold it, Rabbeinu Tam holds it oiseres lebayla but not lebayl, it's only because of mal boy mal. Yes, the question is over here. What's the din of a woman that was under the influence of drugs, and therefore, was she taken malo boy mal? There's an interesting Ur Sameach on the Rambam in Perek Chavdal the Vilchas Ishus Halacha Yutes as a suffix. He says if it did kishuf and through the kishuf she was mezaneh, she was under the influence of a kishuf, he's not sure. Maybe it's a oinus, maybe it's not maybe it's not beratzen. Even though he didn't force her, he just did a kishuf on her. And he says that it's mashma from the Yerushalmi, that through kshafim, when something was done to her that changed her, altered her vision, so she is considered oinus and she is muteres l'bayla. So if you could look at it and say that a person under the influence of drugs is bedugmas kishuf, and therefore whatever happened afterwards is bedugmas oinus. You could look.
The drug you do by herself.
Right. So then we'll go to the next one. Now, maybe she's a shaita. Yeah, there is in Pischei Tshuva and Siman Kufayin Ches, the Shashuvas Marsham, there's a Divrei Yatziv, Mishpatei Uziel, and a bunch of other places, that if a woman was mezana when she was a shaita, she's not asura l'baila, and we consider it like a oinus. There's books of Chuvas called Mayan Oimer, that's Shilas that were asked Rav Adi Yosef, was written by one of his Talmidim. Over there, one Chelik Zayin Pei Gimel Siman Tes. Over there, he brings that he once asked Rav Adi Yosef about a woman that was hospitalized because she was depressed, and then she told her husband that she was mezana while she was mezana in the mental hospital. And the Rav Yosef says it's mutter because first of all, even she's a shaita, so it's not it's considered like a aynus, and she's also not neman on what she says. Yeah, so that is that. So beside the drugs, you could say that she's a shaitan. It's all not a problem. But all this whole discussion only applies when he divorces her because of this reason. But over here, and he was chayav l'garsha. Over here, he wasn't chayav l'garsha. He didn't divorce her because of this. He didn't believe her right away, even though he said then and he said now that he believes her. Now he's not trusted to say that he believes her, and he continued living with her afterwards. So if he continued living afterwards, and he divorced her only a few years later, is a proof that he was not planning on, that he did not divorce her because he believed her. Rather, he got into a fight with her 3-4 years later, and then he divorced her. So therefore, you can't say that the get was because of this reason, because of the aynus, because of the znus. I have to say that the get was for a different reason. He wasn't megarisher because of this. Since he wasn't megarisher because of this, l'chayro, there's a makom to say that it is fine. Now, this is where I stopped. I was working on it then. I got the question. I never finished it.
How did the shaila get to you?
I don't know. I don't remember how things got to me. The shaila got to me somehow, and it was halfway through when I was still working on it. I started speaking with some of the banim to discuss it like I usually do. You don't do it. In the meantime, she's unstable, and so he's unstable. And by the time I finished researching it, they decided they're not interested in pursuing it, and so the tshuva got stuck in the middle, and the story got stuck in the middle, and it stayed that way. I still found the files of when I wrote it. And with that, we will finish. And it's going to be a shir Monday in the Chassidovin.